Oh, hi, how you doing? I'm Steve Johnson. I want to welcome you to our new podcast called Renovation Project. I'm a former general contractor here in Southern California. I've built quite a few homes up in Beverly Hills and Palisades, down into the Palos Verdes area and Rolling Hills, and also down in Shady Canyon, Irvine, and Newport Beach on the Balboa Peninsula. So I've had my hands in a lot of custom homes throughout Southern California, but I'm also, for the last 23 years at least, I'm an ordained pastor and a teaching pastor at a local church here in the South Bay. I'm also a professor of biblical studies and ethics, and if that's not all, I'm still actively working nights as a Class A longshoreman down in the Port of Long Beach. So I've got a lot of things going on, and this weekly program that we are going to produce is not going to be your typical construction remodel type show that you and I and everybody kind of enjoys all of these programs on cable TV, though I believe you're going to learn an awful lot about what goes into building a house, constructing one, and of course what it takes to maintain one. It is my intention to use all of my life experiences from my pastoral ministry and from my academic studies, and of course my different involvements in construction, to present to you living parables, construction parables, as it were. I've been involved in various phases of construction for as long as I've been married, and that's been 45 years to my beloved Layla and my engineer. Beginning as a finished carpenter, building interior sailboats, world-class cruisers, and then some Transpac racers as well. And then I moved into building a finished carpentry company, and we did curved staircases and interior wood handrails, fireplace mantles, wood trim, and things like that. And then I finally morphed into a general contractor building large estate homes. Did a few smaller remodels and additions, but actually moved into new construction. And through all of that, I mastered the process and sequence for constructing a custom residence. But as a pastor and an educator, all during this time, I couldn't help but draw the parallel between building and constructing a physical house and that of our personal spiritual residences. And these are the life lessons that I want to pass on to each of you. And as I mentioned, though most of my general contracting involved the construction of ground-up, brand-new homes, up to, I think the biggest one I did was about 17,000 square feet. I did on occasion take on a few remodels. And one memorable remodel that actually forms the foundation, as it were, for this particular program, Renovation Project, it sets the stage. And so let me give you a bit of a narrative. This is actually a true story. I'm not going to mention the owners, but this is a real situation, a real house. This is not fabricated, but let me tell you how it all began. There was this young couple with a couple of teenage kids, and they wanted a bigger place. They wanted some place that had a little bit more property, a little bit larger estate. And they got contacted by their real estate agent, who said, "We have a very short window to view a house that I think you're going to like." The house was 9,000 square feet. It was sitting on 6.5 equestrian acres, had a tennis court, had a swimming pool, had a single guest suite down by the tennis court, as well as converted stables up at the top of the property. And so they went with their agent, along with all sorts of agents and all sorts of other clients looking at this estate. So the day that they walked through the house, they didn't even notice. The thing is dressed to the nines. It was absolutely beautifully staged. And again, they didn't notice the breeze blowing. All the windows were open. They didn't notice the candles placed all throughout the house. All they knew was this was something that they wanted. So they did their due diligence, and they submitted a bid that they knew was slightly over comps, and they did not want to lose this house. So they anxiously waited for, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks or so, before they heard that they actually had won the bid. So, of course, it went right into escrow. But by the time the whole thing closed, the whole process was about 2 months. So finally, escrow closed, and they got the keys to the property. So they anxiously loaded up in the car and had their kids with them and made their way through the auto gate and up the winding cobblestone pathway into the auto courtyard. Had all these king palm trees lining the courtyard. So they all get out, and they're all anxiously standing at the front door. Husband opens the door up, and inside the foyer, what met them wasn't at all what they had expected. You see, after they had viewed the property, everybody only had a one-day shot. So after the property was viewed, the house was, all the staging was removed, the windows were closed, door was locked, and now it was sitting here 2 months later baking in the Southern California sun. So the day that they arrived to take possession of their new residence, again, it was a warm day. And when they finally stepped into their newly purchased home, they didn't smell scented candles and fresh flowers. What met them was the putrid stench of urine and decay. So you can imagine, they step into this new house of theirs, and they literally had to put their hands over their noses and their mouths just to try to walk through their new home. And remember, this was an as-is estate. They couldn't go back to anybody. This was an as-is estate. You submit your bid, the house is yours, and the house was theirs. So needless to say, they did not even make it through the entire estate without bolting outside and gasping for air. They were clueless as to what was wrong. They did not see any live, I should say, a dead carcass or animal or something that would have generated the reason for what the stench and the smell was. They didn't see anything. The house was actually clean. So they called the home inspector immediately to help them determine what in the world was wrong with this house, because it surely smelled wrong. So they gave him permission to cut some inspection holes in the drywall and look anywhere you need to look. We need to find what's going on in this house. And so after he completed his walkthrough, he put his report together. And it wasn't one of those good news, bad news type scenarios. There was no good news. It was all bad news. And what he discovered was just a sampling of what later would be revealed as a catastrophic situation regarding the house. You see, the previous owner had allowed the house to fall into serious disrepair over a number of years because of his own failing health. And as a result, the rodents occupying the outside hillside area found their way up the date palms, the king palms, and they jumped onto the roof and made their way into the attic roof vents. Everywhere the inspector opened up a hole in the drywall, he found live rats, he found dead rats. Rats were behind the cabinets, they were under the cabinets, they were actually in the hood over the stove area. They were using the HVAC ductwork as a freeway. There were rats all over the place. He didn't know how many there were, but everywhere he looked, he found them. And not only did he find rats, there were skunks, possums, squirrels. At least the rabbits had enough sense to stay outside. I think there were raccoons and also 2 6-foot-tall beehives up in the attic. We later discovered thousands of rats in this place. It was a disaster. It was a biological disaster. So needless to say, one day when I got a phone call from a very frantic woman, she said I had come recommended to her and that I needed to make an appointment with you. And so I, of course, said, well, I appreciate that somebody referred me. Tell me about your house. Who's your architect? Who's your engineer? Do you have lighting consultants and interior decorators? I mean, and off I'm going on to this tangent. And she says, no. You don't understand. We recently purchased an as-is estate in Orange County, and there are some serious issues with it that we need you to look at. And I think I paused for a minute and I said, I appreciate the fact, again, that someone referred me, but didn't they tell you that I'm really not a remodel guy? I build new homes. And she said, yes, but you came recommended, and we really need you to take a look at our property. Well, I didn't realize the situation, of course, at that point. and neither did I understand the depth of the trouble that they were in. I had some projects in the area, so I said she wouldn't give up. So I said, okay, let me at least come by. I'm not guaranteeing that I can do anything for you. I'm really busy, but I'll at least take a look, and I'll give you some recommendations. So we scheduled an appointment to meet on the site and walk the project together. And of course, they handed me a copy of the inspector's report, and I just flipped through it. But basically, we walked through the house, and doors were all open. They had placed some big fans that was moving some air, and you could smell the smell of bleach and air freshener, and it was still a very peculiar and disturbing odor that was beneath it all. And so after a complete walkthrough and peering into the open inspection holes that the home guy had opened up, and after seeing rats scurry down in the wine cellar down in the basement, I basically had seen enough. And I turned to the husband and wife and I said, I really am not ready to take on a major remodel at this point. But from what I see, you've got three options. Option number one, go back to your realtor, like right now, and have them list it again and get out of this place. It's a disaster. From front to back, from top to bottom, this place has got issues. And you might be better off just getting your money back or as much as you possibly can. Option number two, bulldoze the entire house and let's just start fresh. I've got really good architect. I've got engineers and designers. I've got a great team of subcontractors. I said, this is an amazing, really cool piece of property, and there's so much we could do with this. So if we just bulldoze the place, there's some things we can maybe save, the tennis court and the pool, and but we can build you a really, and I'm going on and on and on like this, and so the wife jumps in and she says, and option number three. And I said, well, option number three is exploratory. We have to strip this house. And she says, well, how much? I said, down to the studs. I said, we got to pull the roof off. We got to pull all the cabinets, all the fixtures. We got to strip the drywall, pull the insulation. I said, we got to look at this place. From what the inspector has already seen in just some of these inspection holes, this place has got some serious issues to it. So the husband chimes in and he says, will that be cheaper? And I said to him, honestly, not necessarily, but I just don't know. Right now I'm looking at cabinets. I'm looking at countertops, a lot of drywall. I can't see what the rats have done. I can smell it. The rat urine and the feces, that's devastating to a house. So without putting my eyes on the inside of it, until it's totally gutted, I can't give you a price. So there is a big question mark with option number three. But whoever does this is going to have to do that for you. I would need to strip the house, bring in an architect, an engineer. We got to see what kind of damage is inside the house, and perhaps a geologist, and then we can kind of be in sync on the same page to figure out what's wrong and how do we fix it. Then I said to them, you know what, why don't you just think about it, give me a call back. I'm not guaranteeing that I can help you at all. I'll do my best. If nothing else, I can give you a referral. But the husband did not want to let me get away without making some kind of a commitment. He wanted to know his next moves. Here he is, this as is house that he's holding a mortgage on, and he's saying, Steve, wait. We don't like either option number one or number two, but we are intrigued by option number three. And then he said, will you help us? And there it is. And I'm thinking to myself, why did he have to go and do that? Why did he have to go and ask me to help him? I just wanted to give my advice and expertise and be on my way. I didn't really have time for this, but as a Christian, as a Christian builder, I don't care how busy I am. I don't like telling people no. If it's within my power to help, and if somebody needs help, and I can help and resolve, especially a situation where people are desperate and just don't know what to do. And for some crazy reason, I just felt the Lord telling me that I was supposed to connect with these people, and so it began. Well, friends, this particular renovation project, which I just gave you a little basic narrative about, this is how this whole thing started. This is a real-life example of why renovation is not optional. This is why we have to renovate. And I not only want to explain the process that we went through in digging into this house and what we found in discovery and how we came up with a solution, how we repaired it, how we brought this majestic house that had fallen into disrepair back into a second life, where this family could enjoy it with their family and friends and not look backwards, but look forwards with great delight and great joy. This couple, they weren't interested in option number one. They weren't interested in option number two that I presented. They weren't going to turn and run. They really couldn't very easily. But neither were they willing to drop the house. They didn't want to go through that whole process. And you know, as I thought about it, that was really remarkable to me, because that's the way God is. He is never into option number one. An attribute of God is not running away. That is just not something he does. If we learn anything from the poor choices that Israel made during the Exodus and the 350 years that Judges records called the occupation, what we learn from that is that God never cut his losses and ran away from Israel. Again, running away, thank God, it's not an attribute of him. He doesn't do that. I'll own it. I was the one who wanted to run away. I wasn't real interested in the project. I just saw liability just all over the place. But not so with God. It doesn't matter the state that we find ourselves in. What we see is God running toward us. That's the Bible story. It's like the prodigal son's father. When he sees his son on the horizon, and you can just picture him, he kind of pulls up his robe and he's just after his son. That which has died has come back. It's like the parable that Jesus told about the lost coin, about the lost sheep. He goes after them. And all the lost people on the planet. What does that tell us? He's not into option number one because he's in it to win it. And if we see anything in Jesus going to the cross, that's God coming after us. If he's running, if he wants to bolt and get out of here, he wouldn't have gone through all of the trouble to go to the cross for us. As a matter of fact, then he's therefore not into option number two either. His refusal to leave us, to run from us, kind of tells us that we are of eternal value and worth. And yeah, we've messed up big time. We are infested and all of that. But it tells us that he is not into destroying us and to demolishing us, to bulldoze us down. Let me read you Isaiah 42:3. This is a fabulous verse. It says, "He will not break a bruised reed, and he will not put out a smoldering wick." Let me read it to you again. Isaiah 42:3. He will not break a bruised reed, which means if you, by your choices, or maybe how people have devastated you, situations of life, maybe you've chosen certain ideologies and lifestyles that have been rather devastating in your life, and you are bruised. Well, what this tells us, he's not going to snap you the rest of the way. If you are fragile and barely hanging on, what Isaiah is telling us is that God is not going to come alongside and take you out. And then when it says he will not put out a smoldering wick, you know what that is? You don't have much of a flame. You just have kind of smoke kind of coming off of the wick. In other words, you are almost out. But what Isaiah tells us is God's not going to He's not going to put you out. He's not running from you, and it tells us that he is all about restoring us. And that's why God is only, as these clients were, only into option number 3. We're all created in his amazing image, and sin has distorted that image. It's caused us to be compromised and infested by sin's destructive effects. But you see, God knows what we can look like. As the ultimate contractor, He completely understands the process by which you and I can become what we can't even fathom we can become. And that's why He's only into option number 3. You see, Jesus is a gentle contractor, but He's a firm contractor. In other words, He loves you just like you are, but He loves you too much to let you stay that way. He wants you and I to soar above the circumstances of our choices and life situations and circumstances and all of the things, the roadblocks that have been thrown in your way. And we could look at our lives and say things were a mess. But He sees in you and I something that we can't see ourselves. He wants you to leave all that behind. He wants you to make the call, just like this couple did to me. And yes, they were frantic. Well, sometimes, friends, we need to be frantic as well. In other words, sick and tired of being sick and tired, because God wants to design a residence. He wants to rebuild, renovate, to remake the image of God in us that's been compromised. So if you're broken, if you're barely breathing, if you are totally infested with the compromises of this world and choices that you've made, you've come to the right contractor in Jesus. He never says no to a renovation, even though, again, I'll admit it, I was trying. You see, we might smell the rottenness and think that that's the only normal we've ever had, and perhaps it is. But what is your normative? What's your normal default does not have to be your future. In Jesus, we can change, and we can be remodeled and renovated so that the beauty arises from the ashes and the glory arises from the gutter itself. So, friends, I want to encourage you, don't doubt me when I tell you that what your current normative is not the last word. No matter how long that's been normal for you, the barely hanging on, barely breathing, feeling broken, and the smoldering wick that's just almost out, that does not have to stay that way. With Jesus, we can be rebuilt. The key is, are you willing to allow Him entrance? Are you willing to invite Him into the process of demolition and exposing the infestations of your life? Because if we do that, there's no way we can comprehend the beauty and the glory that will come from that. He has a plan for you and I beyond, I think, what we can even fathom. And perhaps some of you have lost the dream because the pain that you're in and the devastation that you've experienced in life has only left you with nightmares and no longer dreams. The remodeled you and I needs to start right now. Matter of fact, it's imperative that we can't stay the way we are. When Jesus said to occupy until He comes, that didn't mean for us to retire and relax in our spiritual armchairs with a channel changer. He meant for us to keep busy with kingdom business. And part of that kingdom business is working on our temple, the temple that He inhabits, that it would be glorifying to Him how we live out our lives. Layla and I thoroughly enjoy watching some of these remodel programs, and again, I'm sure you do as well. There was a new program, I think it's this season new, and we have watched all of the episodes of it. It's a renovation show that promotes no demo, zero demo. And yeah, they take out some countertops and pull some cabinets and things, but what it means by that is no major wall blowouts. They aren't blowing out walls and putting in headers and opening up spaces. It's pretty much dealing exactly with the bones of the house. And they'll do some flooring and quartz tops and paint and that kind of stuff. It's a program that touts the idea of surface upgrades only. Again, no demo, no foundation work. And she does an amazing job. Really, she does. She's very creative, has a great touch. And her clients all love their newly designed same house, but just upgraded. Well, let me tell you why that is not just a bad idea for you and me personally. It is actually catastrophically horrible for you and I to do that. You see, not doing any demo is the kind of personal remodel that most of us do all of our lives. We renovate what people can see. and very rarely deal with the stuff that's on the inside. Yeah, we'll push around the configuration of the appliances and the furniture, the trim. We'll paint things up and put a lot of cologne on and all that stuff to get rid of the fact that we are infested. But who wouldn't want to live in a totally remodeled surface fix-up? I mean, everybody would. Everybody does. Now, what if instead of just 3 options, option number 1, running away, number 2, destroying, and number 3, exploratory adventure and rebuilding, what if instead of those 3, I presented a 4th one? What if I presented as a 4th option, just don't worry about it? Let's close the holes back up that the home inspector made. You know what? Let's resurface the entry floors. And if you don't like those countertops, we'll fix those. And let's throw a lot of paint, everywhere. And what if that's all I told them to do? Knowing full well that the inside of this house is being devastated by decay and urine and death. I mean, what kind of a contractor would I be if I actually made that suggestion as an option? Turning my back on something that seriously was destroying this house. But see, as far as our lives are concerned, we tend to do that all the time. Christians are notorious for doing that. In other words, don't worry about what's inside just as long as nobody sees it, as long as nobody knows about it. I mean, I'll keep throwing on, fresh paint, and no one will ever suspect that I'm actually infested and need a serious renovation. And this, my friends, is a situation that we all need to deal with. No matter how far along you are on your spiritual journey, if you're just beginning or if you're a seasoned Christ follower, we can never stop renovating. This is we can use the word sanctification. That fits. That's what we do. We're becoming more like Christ every day. That's renovating. That's changing the old, bringing in the new. You see, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but as your contractor, I'm going to give it to you straight. Cabinets, new quartz tops, paint, that's not going to solve your problem. And I'm in here with you. I'm not pointing a finger at you at all. We are the Renovation Project. All of us are. All of us are in need of serious renovation, and it's going to take, I know you might not want to hear it, it's going to take going backwards so that we can go forward. That's just the way remodels work. Now, I'm not opposed to, demolition is not necessarily a fun thing. It tends to start that way. A lot of people love swinging a sledgehammer a couple minutes. But demolition's not, it's not easy. And on a personal note, how many of you really like the idea of opening up your life to somebody and letting them see, letting them come in and inspect? I mean, not only do we not want people to do that, we don't even want to let God do that. Even though he knows us, he needs us to invite him in to assist us in the process. You see, starting is much easier than being consistent and moving forward in the project. It's like starting a diet. It's like starting a new regimen at the gym. Most of us can muster up enough, I'm sick and tired of this, that I've got to start something. And actually, most diets work if you stick with them, and you can find one that kind of fits your lifestyle and routine. The basic idea is lifestyle change consistency, that you stick with it, and over a period of time, you end up at a place that you wanted to go. Basically, we need new habits, right? And some say that habits are established, I think it's called the 2190 rule, that if you intentionally, let's say diet, if you change your diet for 21 straight days, a strict regimen, that and then for the rest of the 90 days, you basically practice what you've regimented yourself to do, and you can establish a habit. Now, there's also some research that shows that 66 straight days of doing a diet, a regimen, a change in lifestyle, whatever that discipline you're trying to change, that about 66 days is the average, that something then becomes routine to you. It becomes a default to you, that you've changed another habit and you've created a new one. And that's an average. Some people are more disciplined and it changes much sooner, and some not so much, and it might take a little bit longer. But you see, if we are going to allow the Holy Spirit into our lives to do some exploratory work, as I was about to do on this house, we need more than 66 days. We need to submit to that where we get the habit going. But then we can't stop. Renovating, like I mentioned, is a lifelong project. It's a perpetual, ongoing, never-ending remodel, upgrade for the glory of God. And now if that sounds like a difficult task, if that sounds like you're just going to lose your freedom and your individuality, think again. Remember, God's not into option number 1. He's not running. He's not into option number 2. He's not going to take you out. God is only into option 3. Come alongside you and to assist you. You see, we need to work with Him. We are the Renovation Project, and we need to allow Him access. And it's not a matter of working, but we have a part to play in this whole process as well. Now, perhaps you need some motivation. Maybe you need to see, well, what is this finished picture look like? In the weeks ahead, I'm going to talk with you about blueprints, about plans. When I go into a project, I have been given a pretty extensive set of blueprints. And I know where I'm going. I can look and see the different details that are represented there. If you've ever done a remodel on your house, a kitchen or a master bathroom, when you're finished, when you're complete, I know it is with us when we walk into an area that we have remodeled, you just kind of go, you know what, this is really nice. Why didn't I do this sooner? And you're enjoying what you've created, what you've completed. And yes, you remember the process, and maybe some of it was difficult, some of it was expensive and time-consuming and all that stuff. But it all goes away when you realize what you've accomplished and what has changed for the better. Friends, I want to encourage you to keep your eyes on the finished picture. But you might be saying, I have no clue what the finished picture of me is supposed to look like. And I would have to say that is a fair question. That's a fair assessment. What if I were to tell you that I know what the finished picture of you looks like? Would you consider me presumptuous and perhaps a bit arrogant? Perhaps. But you see, every house that I have ever built really is the same house done in different configurations. I mean, a foundation is a foundation, different shapes and sizes, and different kinds of footings, caissons, and bathroom is a bathroom, HVAC is HVAC. And I don't want to simplify this too much, but you get the point that each house has these items. Some other things. Some houses maybe have a security system and different kinds of audio and video systems. It's just a matter of how the architect designed the house. And we put all of these parts and pieces. I'm not saying that it's just all boilerplate like that, but the fact is we have an amazing architect. And you need to know something. You're not a track house. You are a custom home. And you know the condition of your home better than anybody. When you look yourself in the mirror, you know who you are. You know your hurts. You know your issues of forgiveness. You know your pain and your sorrow. You know the devastation that you've been through and how people have wounded you. And we need to give all that to God. He has an amazing plan. You see, when plan A gets messed up, he's never foiled. He has a plan B. He has a plan C. He has a plan D. And you say, well, is that as good as it's as good as it's just different? Because he will take what we give him of our lives and he can rebuild it. And sometimes we have scars and leftover things that are part of the tapestry that makes up who you and I are. And sometimes those past painful moments are just like portraits on the wall that remind us of the journey that we've been on and God's grace in it all and how he restores us. So let me ask you, have you ever put a puzzle together? I'm sure you have. Maybe you like the big piece ones, or maybe you like those 3,000, 5,000, complicated type ones. But how do you select a puzzle? By the picture on the box top, right? I mean, it'd be pretty crazy, right? If you just went to the toy section and here's the puzzles on the shelf, and they were all just cardboard boxes with no pictures. It just says 3,000 pieces, and one says 5,000 pieces, and you go, okay, but what is it? And it just says puzzle. Well, who's interested in that? If you've ever done a puzzle, what's close by? The box top, right? So we always are referring to the picture, and that's what my blueprints do for me. I have elevation pages. I have all sorts of detail pages that kind of tell me about the puzzle pieces and where they go and how they fit. A puzzle takes time, doesn't it? And it takes some assistance. I don't know about you. Sometimes we've had a puzzle on a table, and whenever you got 5 or 10 minutes, you come and find something that will fit. What's the first thing you grab or look for in a puzzle? When you've taken all the pieces out, and matter of fact, you look at that picture on the box top and you go, very cool. You open it up, doesn't look like that picture at all. It's got all of these parts, right? So the first thing we grab are what? We try to find the corners. We turn everything upside down and we try to find the corners, right? Nobody flips the puzzle pieces on their back, and so you're looking at cardboard. Now, again, you're looking at the box top, and the backside of the puzzle is not exposed. So we flip everything up where we can see it. We don't know where that little piece will fit, but we know it's part of this puzzle. And how frustrating is it when you get to the end of a puzzle and a piece is missing? So every piece is important. But we get the 4 corners first, and then we find the straight edge ones, and we get this border. And all of these pieces are going to end up finding their way into this bordered puzzle. God gives us the parameters of what our life looks like. And we help in the process of putting ourselves together again with the help of the Holy Spirit. Let me answer that question about what you look like. I'm going to have to prolong it a little bit because that's what this program is about showing you what the final picture looks like and how to get there. So I can't do that today, but I'm going to assist you in that process. However, before we close today, I want to give you an example from God's code book, what we call the Bible, for starters. And let me read to you some of the Apostle Paul's words from Galatians 5, 22 and 23, and this is out of the Message. He says, "But what happens when we live God's way? He brings gifts into our lives much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely." And that's part of what we're going to look like. Quite a change, isn't it? Now, to get there, see, the problem is if we don't do any demo, if we don't go inside and correct some things, then this is all external cologne. This is all clothing that we put on, but it's just on the outside of us. It's a show. It's not who we are. So Paul gives us some instructions for demo. He tells us before we can get this, because these traits, these characters have to supplant what's already there, the infested part. So let me read to you about what Paul says about the demo and the attributes that we have existing in us that need to be dealt with and taken care of. Verse 19. "It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, an impotence to love or to be loved, Divided homes, divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions, ugly parodies of community, and Paul says, I could go on. This isn't the first time he says, I have warned you, you know. If you use your freedom this way, you will not inherit God's kingdom. Friends, in other words, if we don't go through this personal option number 3 demo project with the Holy Spirit, we are never going to arrive at the wholesome, completed CEO, the certificate of occupancy, I should say, where we know that we are in compliance with the codes, with the code book, and that we are pleasing to our inspector. We can't stop renovating, but we've got to deal with some things along the way so that the correct traits, the right character, the right heart needs to be established within us, that we might be glorifying to the architect who's designed us. As a general contractor, when I walked into this beautiful estate that had serious internal issues, I knew it was going to require a lot of work. I mean, more so than a ground-up brand new house. But you see, what they didn't know was how good I was. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I knew how to go about this. I knew what we could do with this place. Now, granted, I didn't know exactly what we were up against just yet, but I know construction. I know the processes and the protocol, and I knew that part of my job was to hold the hand of this couple and to assure them that we had it under control, and to give them the picture, constantly look at the picture. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're going, you know, and you go pick your countertops. You go start selecting some things, and we're going to make this thing an amazing place. You see, I didn't walk into this project and say, wow, this is really messed up. Good luck. And then take off. Your current circumstances, your current situation do not have to set your future path. They no longer have to define you. You can stop right now and say, I'm going a different direction. I want God to have permission to not just cut some inspection holes in me, but to have at it. To come in and do the required demolition that's required in my life to get me to that place where He can rebuild me and remake me into His image. And you see, the choices that we've made, the bad pathways that we've gone down, the hurts that people have done to you, you cannot imagine the joy and the glory that will be yours when these things are all dealt with. And we can stand before God and just give Him praise and glory for His grace extended and for all the help He's assisted in making us into people that we had no clue we could be. You see, He's never going to just paint over areas in your life and just say you're good to go. He's going to tell us when we need to go backwards. And that's our part. We need to assess what He points His finger at and says, we need to address this. We need to take care of this. If we're going to make any progress at all, we need to deal with the past so that we can go forward. So friends, the Renovation Project program, I hope it will draw you in. I hope it will assist you in understanding who you are, and not just who you are, but who you are in God, and that you are loved. He's not running from you. He's not going to destroy you or dismantle you. He's going to come alongside and rebuild you into His image in a way that you can never even imagine. But we need to take ownership of the process. And like the owners that I dealt with, they were given a house, bought a house that was theirs. All that damage was not done by them, but they had to own it. They had the mortgage on that property. And so it was up to them to decide what they were going to do. And so you and I need to take ownership of the condition of our spiritual houses and our spiritual journey, whether you've caused some disruption or somebody else has. So I want you to remember something else important. This is not a do-it-yourself program or project. I'm here to assist you. The Holy Spirit's going to come in and guide you along the way. But when I say it's not a do-it-yourself project, it does require you to engage and participate. And that's what I'm here to help you through. I want to be your contractor and help you in the process of becoming an incredible residence for God. So I hope you'll join me on the journey to an entirely new you, one that reflects the beauty and grace of our amazing architect and designer. Till next time. Thanks for joining us today. For more information, check out our website at renovationproject.org. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be alerted to when our next video is posted. Go with God.